Welcome, everyone, to Here Be Dragons. I'm your host today, John Webster, flying solo, but I'm joined by some very special guests, Aemy Blackfyre and Michal, who does the podcast of Surprise, and she's also a writer for Hypable.com. Welcome, guys. It's a pleasure to have you.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, I've already kind of messed up a little bit on my first solo time because I didn't do the countdown, which Stephen always puts up every week. So
20, 19,
yeah, sorry. Thank you. 18. Yeah, so today we're going to be talking about Yennefer from The Witcher, which, like, I was trying to think of stuff to do this week since Stephen and Nessie handed me the car keys. And I had like a list of things that I've kind of been itching to do, and I ran them by Aemy because she may have invited herself. But
what
she
I
was,
do best.
Yeah, she was like, "Oh yeah, let's talk about Yennefer," and I was like, "Yes, I agree." So yeah, Michal, I want to first hand it over to you. Just talk about sort of what you do and like how you're immersed in The Witcher, how you first started with it and all that stuff.
Yeah, so I fell into The Witcher thanks to Twitter. I had been hearing so much about it last January, which feels like a bazillion years ago. And finally I was like, okay, fine, I'll watch it. So I kind of, I sat down, I watched it. I wasn't obsessed or anything. I enjoyed it. And I was like interested to see where it went. But I was definitely, I actually remember thinking like, I'm not reading these books. Like I remember, oh my gosh, I forget whose Twitter it was, but they were like, just if you're confused, you have to read the short story books first and then you go to the novels. And I'm like, I'm not doing that. And then I'm not sure why I decided to do it. I think I had like an extra audio credit on Audible or something. And I just like started reading the books, and then I started talking to friends who had read them already. And that was really what kind of started pulling me through. And yeah, I just kind of like at a certain point, I was like, oh my God, these are phenomenal fantasy novels. And just like the everything that you love about Martin and, the other greats of the genre, you really love about The Witcher, but it does present it in a somewhat different way. And the fact that they're older books, even than Song of Ice and Fire, kind of gives it, even more to interpret. And obviously we're reading like translations of it and stuff, because I draw the line at learning Polish to read The Witcher, but which I know some friends who are considering, which I think is really dedicated. But yeah, wow. that was kind of my path to these books. And I was telling Aemy and John right before we started that I finished reading. I got to a major climax in the final book on the subway the last time I took the subway before like quarantine, and I had to leave the city and like everything. So it's very kind of like the end of The Witcher is kind of very linked with the beginning of the pandemic for me. And that's when we started Podcast of Surprise. But yeah, it's been a really wonderful world to have.
Yeah, it's weird to hear about doing things in, as we like to say, in the before times. Aemy, obviously everybody knows that you and I host a YouTube channel together, but we've never really talked about The Witcher before. So why don't you talk a bit about your history with the show and reading the books?
Yeah, so I saw the show on Netflix and fell in love pretty much like 5 minutes into the first episode. And a lot of people, especially who hadn't read the books, complained about the time jumping around back and forth. I dig that stuff so hard. I love these puzzle pieces that eventually all come together. So I was so here for it. And then I heard about the books from a little podcast called Podcast of Surprise. And I started reading along with the podcast. And so that's how I started reading the book. So I'm only like a book and a half in. But I'm really excited to eventually get to the novels because, like I was saying before we started streaming, I'm really a fan of the novel as a form. And the short stories aren't quite my jam, but I really like what is going on in the novels. And the show itself, is obviously has presented some things that I haven't yet read. So I'm really excited to see kind of the differences. But I know most people in the chat most likely have just seen the show. So, I'm going to try and keep my Yennefer to the show Yennefer, but that's going to be a little difficult because, we do get a lot more in the books kind of about little kind of quirks and mannerisms and stuff that she does that I think is very subtle and you can do in fiction that you can't really do in the TV series. But pretty much from the first episode that Yennefer shows up, she became my favorite character when I was watching. And she has continued to be my favorite character. So whenever John specifically said, let's talk about Yennefer, and then he had like 5 other things, I like barely even read the 5 other things. I was like, we're doing Yennefer. That's what's happening. Because obviously I think there's a lot of, you guys know me, I love some feminist commentary. So I think there's a lot of gender roles stuff going on there. And I think that, there's a lot going on as far as her relationship with Geralt. So I'm really excited to dive into it.
Yeah, I have to say.
Oh, sorry. And also, I'm going to start doing some Witcher content on my blog and channel. So those that
nice.
like Witcher, please sub to me. Plug. All right, go ahead, John.
I'll say that, first of all, I haven't read the books yet because I'm dying to find the time. I just can't. But the way I got into the show first, I wasn't like super highly anticipating it, but Netflix was putting out a bunch of character videos, and the one I saw that really sort of intrigued me was the one for Yennefer, because all I knew about the show from all the sort of publicity was Henry Cavill in white wig, who looked like he was trying to be like either a Targaryen or Legolas or something. But then when I saw that video, and it gave a look into Yennefer's story about how she starts off and how she becomes powerful and becomes such a a major figure in this story, I was like, that actually seems like a really great character, and the actress's performance looked like it was going to be really good. So I said, you know what, that intrigues me. Let me give the show a shot. Of course, then they make you get through the whole first episode with no Yennefer, and I'm like, where is she? But I really came to enjoy the show a lot. And Amy, I'm kind of with you. I know people complained about the format.
Yeah.
Yes, everybody check out Amy's channel.
Sorry, someone asked for the link, so I was like, plug.
I really liked the format of the time differences. I didn't even know they were doing that at first, because they kind of conceal it except for little hints throughout the first couple episodes, but it just shows how these characters are sort of converging throughout time, and they're each going on these different journeys, and I really love, especially when you get towards the end of the season, there's a sense of them all colliding, and it's just really great. But I'll go ahead and say that Yennefer is my favorite part of this show. I think that she's the most interesting character, and I think Anya's performance as Yennefer is just amazing. I do really love the dynamic between her and Geralt, and it's great. I know I know there's plenty of people who prefer to talk about Geralt and Yastier, but but I definitely shipping Geralt and Yennefer. But yeah, so I'll hand it over to you guys now. I've talked enough. Like, what are your feelings about Yennefer, and in comparison, to maybe other characters within the scope of the story?
Go ahead, Michal.
Yeah, I mean, I love her. I think she's such a dynamic and fascinating and difficult character. Like she comes right into the story with so many edges, and they don't, like, some of them get smoothed down, but not all of them. And I really, really love that she just, you know, she's kind of this unapologetic, sometimes bitch, and like, you know, that's okay. Like, she's doing what she has to do in a very difficult world. And like, I don't always agree with her, and I don't always agree with her attitude. And I think there's definitely times that you can call her to task, but at the end of the day, she's really a lost person who has been, you know, deeply wounded. And I really like the way the show portrayed that. And the fact that like we get to see her kind of the wages of that, right? Like becoming kind of heartless and cold, and then rediscovering your emotions, and things that are important to you beyond, you know, being wealthy or whatever, or having power. I love that arc, and I think it's really, really wonderful. And yeah, when she's with Geralt, it's just very sweet.
Yeah, I was.
It's like upsetting.
I was rewatching the last couple episodes of the season today, and when in episode, I think it's episode 6, and when, you know, she's like, I've always wanted to be important to someone, and Geralt is just like, you know, you're important to me, and I'm just like
melting.
It just melts this heart. I love it. Yes, viewers, John is a romantic, didn't you know?
I had no idea. God.
But yeah, so Amy, I know that your favorite character is also Yennefer. So yeah, just go off. What are your thoughts on her?
Going off is my favorite. I think that what I really relate to her is kind of this idea of trying to find power in a male-dominated world as well. And so whenever she does something that you think is kind of power hungry or selfish, or, you know, it's because she has been powerless her whole life. And so you see when in the show, when she first starts out, and, you know, I think it can be seen as a little bit problematic with her being, you know, having deformities, and then all of a sudden being hot, and everyone's like, wow, we all of a sudden care about her. She's cool, you know, when she really was a good person and the same person the whole time, but she was also a lonely person and a person who wanted to be loved. And she saw that the only way to do that in this world was to fix her aesthetics, basically, to be more pleasing to the eye. And so she sacrifices something really big, which is the option whether or not to have children, which to me is a very interesting part of the show. Because I don't want to have children, but that doesn't mean that I want the choice taken away from me, right? So she even has that line when Geralt is like, do you really even want a kid? Like, this is kind of insane, Yennefer, right? And she goes, I just want my choice back. And I think that really is when she solidly became my favorite character, because I saw it as a woman who is being controlled by the men in her life, which is a little P word called the patriarchy. Drink.
Yep.
And I just find that really interesting, that her navigation through this world is about gaining power in order to gain respect, and therefore in order to survive and in order to make her own place in the world. And I really relate to that as someone who has been called bossy. You know, the term ambitious is bad for women, but good for men, right? So I think that her being ambitious and all of that, the way that they look at this sorceress, right? Like when they go on the hunt for the dragon, they mention about like, ooh, I love watching her walk away. You know, they always sexualize her when she could like kill them all with the snap of her finger, right? She's extremely powerful. And I think she's realizing throughout the show that no matter how powerful she gets, she will still be degraded by people. She will still be seen as lesser than, but she's still going to fight and going to try and be the strongest person that she can be. But I think that a lot of her storyline is about realizing that, you know, that she's basically becoming a worse person the more that she is blindlessly following this kind of ambition. And I mean that in a negative way in this case.
Yeah. I do want to go back to what you were saying about, you know, this idea of, you know, story-wise, falling into the trap of, oh, you know, you're a character who suddenly becomes more attractive. We're interested in you. But I think that the thing about Yennefer is that she is so utterly fascinating from the first moment we meet her, and just yeah, I think it's also easy to sympathize with someone who you see, you know, facing great hardship, and she has, you know, unfortunately a horrible life, you know, living at home with you know, her adopted father, who's, you know, going to sell her off for nothing. And I think it's just really great to see that character gain more power and more self-confidence, even as, you know, we're kind of sad to see that she does kind of become worse as you know, the further along she goes on that, until she, throughout the season, we see development where she starts to realize, you know, her path, and, you know, all that stuff. She becomes more self-actualized. And but yeah, I think that it's really just so fascinating, the journey that she goes on. And yeah, it's just a great character arc, I think.
And the thing is, like, she's not always making the right decisions, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I think I find that the part with her, you know, saying that her choice was taken away from her, like, so complicated, you know, to have children, because in a way, yes, she maybe wasn't fully cognizant of the price of that and why she would want it and all that, but she still makes that decision. Like, she hunts the guy down, and she, like, makes that sacrifice herself, and then she kind of, you know, rewrites that situation based on her changing wants later in the show. And, like, I find that really realistic, you know, and the fact that, like, you know, when Geralt calls her out about, like, and he's not 100% right either, but, like, Geralt calls her out on wanting a child, and it's just sort of like, well, is this actually what you want, or is it just a thing that you don't have, you know, that you, like, you can reach for at this point. And I love that flaw, because it is, you know, and I think a lot of people kind of stop at the, like, she's flawed part. But it's so interesting to go beyond that, and to, like, follow her mistakes and the way she treats Tisea, and, like, you know, the way it culminates is really wonderful in that point of making choices, right? Because her story starts with, like, she's not making choices, she's an animal, she's being sold, and then it culminates in a decision.
Yeah.
Hey, Aziz, fellow podcast
yeah,
in the chat.
Hey, thank you for stopping by. Yeah, I think it's interesting because she becomes single-minded, you know, as she's approaching, you know, ascension, and she's like, this is what I want power, and so she's sort of pursuing that without sort of, she doesn't doubt that, but once she has it, it becomes apparent over the years that it's empty. It's, you know, it's not what she expected, and so I think that she's now sort of looking back and seeing what was taken from her that she thought she might be willing to give up, and so I kind of see where Geralt is coming from in that regard, where he's like, are you sure you actually want this, or is it just because you feel it was taken away from you? And she does want that choice. That's what it's all about. But I also like that throughout all this, she's going on a path where maybe she discovers other things. You know, I think her relationship with Geralt is completely unexpected to her, as she is to him, and characters who I don't think expected to find that kind of bond with somebody at that, you know, point in their lives. But yeah, it's just great. I guess we can start. I don't know if you guys want to sort of go back to the beginning of her story, or just sort of break it down by episode. But I really love those first two episodes with Yennefer. I think it's a fascinating story about how, leading from her, accidentally using magic, and then it builds up to what she thinks is, her ultimate success of becoming quote unquote more beautiful and gaining that power, only to then in the next episode we skip past all that time of her having power, and it's sort of the aftermath of it. It's kind of what you don't expect from traditional storytelling. It's like the end of episode 3 feels like such a big climax for her as a character, and then we just skip past all the stuff that she was striving towards, and it's looking at the aftermath of that and where she ends up.
Yeah, we see her get very disillusioned the next time that we see her, right? But we see kind of the origin stories of her, like at Hogwarts learning magic, but it's not a fun Hogwarts. And so she's starting to kind of, she looks around, and a lot of the girls around her are starting to succeed, and she's feeling like she can't succeed. And we have all of these crazy trials, like, catching lightning in a bottle. I mean, these are really dangerous things for these girls to try and do. And I think what I found most interesting is the ending of that saga, where she realizes what's powering everything is these girls who were turned into eels and then kicked into the pool, right? So she realizes that kind of power has sacrifice. That's kind of the first time that she does see it, and it's more clear than the first time she technically saw it with the stone and the trying to make the stone float with the flower kind of exercise, where one of the girls gets her hand, basically burned, like as if acid was poured on it, right? So she learns that using magic means sacrifice, right? Controlling, using your chaos you have to give something up. And so I find that really fascinating, that in the end, her friends, or one of them was definitely her friend, was sacrificed. And that's, I think, where her disillusionment really begins, when she kicks them, or puts them into the pool, and realizes that power is going to come with a cost. And I also think it's the beginning of her not trusting people, because we see that with the guy that she falls for, who then was basically spying on her. Reminds me a little bit of a Jorah Mormont, Dany Targ moment, where someone that you trusted was actually kind of working for the other side. And even if they had a coming to Jesus moment sometimes halfway through, where they go, oh, I don't want to be like this anymore, you're still hurt. And so she realizes that power needs sacrifice, and that she really can't trust anyone. And that's when her disillusioned character that we then see next begins.
I think it's interesting that good one is I think it's interesting, though, that dynamic with the whole spying thing. It's like she's not just being fooled during all that either. I like that she's also spying on him and getting information. So it's sort of, neither one of them is like talking about it, but they both kind of know that they're using each other, but they form this bond and relationship.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that disillusionment is kind of based around manipulating the price, like Yennefer's whole arc is extremely I don't know, monetary is not really the right word, but it sort of is. It's very transactional. And a lot of it comes down to like, who is going to pay so that I don't have to pay, and that I can still get what I want. And I think that's really, dark and unpleasant, and coming from, but like very natural, coming from someone who has kind of been made to bear the brunt of her world's like disdain and like you can go into a lot of, bad ideas people had about people who are disabled being curses and causing curses and stuff like that. But like, I think a lot of her actions through the show are really kind of like fobbing it off on someone else, trying to get what she wants. And I think the incident with the the queen and the baby, which I'm still deeply, deeply disturbed by, is a lot of that, right? Because she comes to this point where it's like, oh, well, mom's dead. Hey, I got this kid. And then it's like, but it slips through her fingers. Like the child was dead. She can't take it. So yeah, I think it's and then at the end, what she decides to do is make her own sacrifice, right? So and like not dodge the bullet, not let anyone else take the fall for her. It's a really complicated journey. And like, again, I think it's like, okay, it's okay if you don't like the things she does, you know. That's something, that's where I think a lot of people get, you know, twisted up with a lot of female characters, is that like, I don't like the things she does, therefore I don't like her. And I think that's just, you're missing so much if that's where your investigation and consideration of a character ends. Well, you don't do it with Geralt, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say that's incredibly
that old-fashioned double standard going on over there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will hear people in all sorts of fandoms make excuses upon excuses for male characters, and then female characters. She did this one thing. She's a bitch. Let's forget about her. I hate her. Well, it's definitely something going on there.
Yeah, I'm very interested in Cahir, the knight who's chasing Ciri. He has a whole thing in the books that I obviously won't get into, but like, I'm very interested to see how his villainy, because he is pretty much a black and white villain, at least in the first season, is perceived by fans, and as maybe that gets a little more nuanced or more developed or whatever, like how quick people are to forgive him for his sins as opposed to Yennefer for her sins.
Well, yeah, it's funny because for me, so far, he's a pretty cardboard cutout character. Yeah. So I do want to see him further developed, because I think it's interesting to, you know, get these different facets of characters who, you know, seem just outright villainous, and maybe they still are, but I like to add some gray into that. And I think that's sort of, those shades of gray are what are so great about Yennefer. So I'm like, for me, like any character who is, you know, not completely good or not completely bad, I'm fascinated by them. I think they're intriguing to watch. You know, Game of Thrones fan here, so obviously. Yeah. But yeah, I find her so intriguing because I so often don't, you know, agree with, you know, either things that she does or things that she says. I think she's all the more fascinating because of that. But, you know, you guys are absolutely right. There's a complete double standard, because there's that tendency for, you know, with women characters to say, oh, they've done, you know, this thing that I'm not crazy about, so they're a terrible character. We see that all the time. And it's ridiculous, because she's fantastic.
And Michal mentioned the scene with the baby, so if I could just piggyback off of that, I think probably my favorite line of the whole first season happens when she's on the beach, and she goes, well, actually, you're lucky. You know, the world is cruel, especially if you're a girl. So you actually see Yennefer being really cognizant of the forces that have been working against her because of her sex. And so I found that really interesting too, because it's also kind of a bit of a commentary on motherhood, right? Because she kind of got the sense that if that baby would have lived, she would have tried to have kind of been a weird, like, adopted mother of her. And so some of that is her frustration of like, well, you know, I didn't get you. So that's she has frustration with that. But then also she has frustration with the world and how difficult it is, right? And so she's, I think, projecting a lot of her own anxieties onto the baby. And that's why I think that scene is particularly impactful, because she kind of opens herself up a little bit more to the audience than she has for the rest of, you know, for the other episodes. She either kind of seems like, you know, a really strong or unemotional, and this, she's kind of a little bit, she really shows some emotion and kind of shows what's going on in her head.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a very sobering scene. it's tough because it's a sort of brutal what she's saying, and especially since we go a long gap without seeing many years of her life, and so it's kind of shocking to go from the person who's sort of achieved what they wanted as far as the power at the end of episode 3, and then by this one we see her at a different point in her life, and she's realized how much all that was sort of built on lies, and as you say, she's speaking a lot to the audience, and we get to peer inside her head and see what she's going through. I think it's great, but it's so incredibly sad, and especially with an actual dead baby sitting next to her, devoid of any color. It's a shocking scene, but I think it's quite brilliant.
Yeah, I mean that whole plot line honestly is such a commentary, because it's not like we're super pro the queen, but at the same time, she's being murdered because she's pumping out daughters. That's why this is happening. And yes, she is very rude is a minor word. I really don't know what word to use for the way she treats Yennefer, but she also thinks that she's about to die and her daughter is about to die, and that is exactly what happens. And I found that very challenging to watch for a lot of reasons, but partly because I couldn't shake the sympathy for that character, just in this world, just like her daughter being shoved into this impossible situation where you have been raised to be powerless, and the idea that Yennefer has not been raised to be powerless, or I guess she was, but she fought back against that, but ultimately that it doesn't give Yennefer the kind of freedom from that persecution that maybe she hoped it would.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking about that, it is kind of that moment when Yennefer finally makes that portal and then she just goes through it by herself. It's like, oh my God. Yeah, you really did that. But she does go
I might call her a bitch too. I might have.
But it's that type of thing. It's not what a hero, in a traditional story should do. But I find that interesting to watch as a study of the character, that she makes that decision at that point, even though she does decide to go back, that she needs to save herself. It's not an admirable thing to do, but it's but it's real. It's at that point you probably would try to just save yourself.
And, I think Anna's exactly what I was just about to say, which is now we know biologically, men, it's your fault she kept having daughters. So, right? I think that's the most, I think that's almost I know nature isn't necessarily have an agenda except to keep going, but it's almost like nature being just ironic and sarcastic, that for centuries and fantasy is usually modeled after a more medieval type time. But, for centuries, women were punished for having daughters or having stillborns. And, a lot of times they definitely decided
or sickly sons, if they weren't right.
Exactly. Yeah. Now we know that most of that can be tied back to the man. So.
Well, Amy, to tie it in with our love of X-Men, I always think of that line from X-Men 2. Actually, they discovered it's, the men who carry the mutant gene, so It's his fault.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's very, a whole, I won't get into it. I was just going to say, a whole religion was born out of a guy wanting to, to be able to divorce his wife so he can keep trying, to have a son, or a son that was healthy. But yeah, so I think that scene, I feel like all of what Yennefer's character is going through and trying to do really culminates into that scene with the baby, and the fact that she's protecting this queen who is, only having daughters, and the way that the queen is kind of struggling with loving her daughter because it's a sign of what she believes is her own failing. I think is so much gender commentary wrapped into just a few scenes. And it's also interesting that that she also, the queen, like offers up the baby. It's like, no, don't kill me. Here, take this child. I mean, it really
dark.
shows how disposable. It's very dark. It shows how disposable little girls are viewed in this culture and in most patriarchal cultures. I'm sorry, I said it again. Drink.
Well, yeah, because that's that sort of ingrainment of the patriarchy seeps into the women as well, which is why at her last that's the plea that she makes, like, I'll give the king a son, take the daughter. It's horribly dark and sad.
And I love that they shot that scene in like brilliant, like blinding brightness. It's it's in the desert, like you can't hide from the sun. It's
very out in the open. There really isn't anywhere to hide, and that I think really adds to the drama and the suspense. And also when I first watched it, and she goes to that last portal onto the beach, and I'm like, yeah, the baby's saved. And it's like, no, we can't have nice things.
I mean,
right, this is on Netflix.
Right.
Yeah, and it's
right,
like and it's not like we're not just going to convey that the baby is dead. No, the baby is going to be this, cold, dark blue color to really drive it home and make you feel like crap.
Yeah.
I think it also shows that how much Yennefer has not really thought through being a mother as well.
100%. Yeah. And like, I don't know how much she chooses her portal openings, but like the baby does die in her arms, and it's like, that's not an accident, or it is an accident, but it's not a writerly accident.
Storytelling wise. It's not an accident.
Yeah. But I was just thinking that this is also, it's so important that this happens in the episode where we see Calanthe at her height, and like this incredibly powerful, like, listen to me or I will cut your head off type of person. And
if we're not careful, this will verge over into a Calanthe.
I know, but
because like, especially that episode, I freaking love it, and all the stuff we get with her, and it's brilliant.
Yeah, but I just think thematically, it's very interesting that scene with Yennefer takes place in an episode where we're also dealing with women and motherhood and choices about womanhood and motherhood and all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. And we see, I'm sorry, this will turn into a Calanthe stream, I promise. But the way that she comes back and she's all bloody in armor, and then she has to go, change into a dress, and she's like, I just was cutting people's heads off, and now, I have to be in this dress, But I think also, and this is something that might be interesting to talk about, is the role that fate plays in the series. I think is really fascinating. We obviously have, right, the law of surprise is all about fate, and if you try to fight against fate, then bad things happen to you. And so I kind of wonder if Yennefer, not being able to have motherhood is a part of her fate or what, because it's Cersei, like the fate itself is like its own character in this series, it seems.
Yeah, and talking again about Calanthe, who is very adamant about not giving her, her life over to the hands of fate, or the life of her, daughter or granddaughter. And for Yennefer, she's also trying to sort of carve out her own path separate from either, quote unquote destiny or fate, or she's mortified when she hears of what Geralt's wish was, because she doesn't feel like she's been in control of a part of her life. And but I also think that maybe what do you guys think about that? Do you think that she's I mean, she is justified in feeling that way because, you know, a wish was made concerning her kind of without her knowing exactly what it was. But I think it also makes her turn away from very real feelings that she has for Geralt.
Yeah, I don't know. It's complicated, right? Because I feel like they're even not as like deeply invested viewers would get that like there's a destiny around Geralt, Yennefer, and Ciri. Obviously, there are three central characters, and the energy when they do meet up is just so wonderful. But I mean, there definitely is a certain like choice and consent, I guess, around it. Obviously, at the same time, Geralt was trying to save her life. I did feel it was maybe a little writerly that like they kind of had to break them up at that point and have Yennefer go off toward toward the battle. But at the same time, it was. I mean, when you tell a stubborn person and somebody who is determined to live their life on their own terms, you know, that this has been done for you, it's a reasonable reaction, even if I was disappointed in it.
Yeah, I mean, and you're not wrong. It's like we have to push Yennefer in a certain direction.
Yeah. She has to go fight the battle. Geralt has to go to Sintra. It's like we can't do that. Now, the only thing I don't understand is why Jaskier is why he and Geralt break up and
right, they're meant for each other. I totally
I know. I certainly friendship it. I haven't decided if I ship it yet because
I do. I mean, I get that moment because Geralt is frustrated and Jaskier just has the ability to kind of say, you know, say things when he should shut up.
Yes, that is definitely true.
And so Geralt kind of lashes out at him, even though, you know, things aren't really his fault. But
he's really Geralt's only friend.
Yeah.
I mean, right? And he's been by his side and everything, but he's also a little annoying. And as someone who has been called annoying before, I can say with professional, you know, kind of firsthand experience, you know, when you're kind of loud and out there and someone is grumpy and not really sociable, then they can lash out at you. And that then, you know, I think that if Jaskier was a little bit more about just kind of, and I think he does later in a lot of the other episodes, kind of be like, oh yeah, like that one time when you know it's definitely later, because he goes, 2 decades and you're still not sure if we're friends, huh, Geralt? You know, he kind of gets that Geralt's, you know, just, you know, pretending to be like not into him is just because he pushes everyone away.
And we probably will make, you know, occasional digressions throughout the hour about the different characters. So I'm just going to say right now that Joey Beatty does a phenomenal job with Jaskier, and I love so many of his lines, especially when they're sort of jokes to the audience. Oh my God, I'm hearing an echo. Sorry. Hopefully it goes away. But like when he says that line at the beginning of one of the episodes, like, "Hi, Geralt. What's it been? A month? A year? Who can tell?" And it's sort of winking at the whole, you know.
Oh, it's very much,
the time thing that the show is doing. But yeah, he's just a riot. I really love him, and the dynamic between him, Geralt, and Yennefer is also fun, where it's like this throuple, as we say. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, they definitely need, like, would it be Garaskier? Jasserelt?
Geralt.
Like, and his name is Dandelion in the books, right, Michal?
His name, well, it depends which translation, but yeah, the main translation is Dandelion, which okay. I don't know why because it's not even a direct translation. I think his name is actually Buttercup in Polish, but they can't do that because that has distinctly feminine implications.
And it makes me think of the Princess Bride. So
yeah, very much. So they kind of just went with Dandelion. I mean, these were translated ages ago, like I think 90s, 2000s. So
what's new, dandelion? Whoa, whoa.
Which is funny because the dandelion doesn't strike me as a particularly masculine name if they were going for that either. So
it's like supposed to be a whimsical, silly bardish name,
know?
And so for them to name him Jaskier, it was fine. But when I was reading the books, I was like, "Where's the bard character?" And I'm like, "There's this dandelion dude. When does he meet Jaskier?" And I was like, "Oh crap, they're the same person." So it kind of confused me at first. And we could have a whole stream on just that. We would obviously want to have someone on who could, actually read the original language.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I find that fascinating because I study Chinese literature, so translation is a big part of what I do, and you can create a whole, when you do finally get a fandom to an English-speaking world, what you do as far as translation really affects kind of, I think, a lot of the way that it's viewed. But I'm sorry, we're getting way off of Yennefer.
Yeah, I know. Well, yeah, it's Here Be Dragons. That's our brand is chaotic.
Names are kind of important though, because like I remember before I'd seen the show, and everybody was talking about it, and I was like, Yennefer. Really? Like I was just very unimpressed. Like it just doesn't, I'm used to it now, but like it felt like a bad fantasy ripoff name, and so it's really interesting, like the things they chose to keep, the things they chose to change, and kind of the way they hit your ear once you like get to know the characters versus, just out cold. I will say that Jaskier and Dandelion are not. There are differences between them. I'll say that.
Yeah.
Well, I think what was it? You, Michal, who was talking about on the podcast of Surprise about the name Yennefer and how it's kind of rooted also, and like Guinevere and the
I think that was Aziz. Yeah, that was a great catch. Okay. Yeah.
When you guys were talking about the strong like parallels with Arthurian legend. With the stories, which is not something I've picked up on, probably because it's still early on and the story on the show. But that made me so excited because I love Arthurian legend, and so if things are kind of headed in that direction to tie in more with that, like I'm definitely pumped for that.
I'm obviously not going to spoil anything. I will say that Sapkowski is a scholar of Arthurian legend, so when he deals with it, he doesn't just deal with the stories, he deals with the meta of the stories as well, and it is like mind-bending how he decides. I can't wait to just like rant about that. He also has
a lot of references to different fairy tales as well. So keep that in mind when you do start reading John. It's really fun to find like the Tale of the Ice Queen or Snow White or these kinds of things. Where he obviously is a well-read person. It's very obvious, and he likes to kind of insert these themes and references to other tales that then kind of, I think, enrich his own story that he's trying to tell.
And it enhances the idea.
I think Yennefer is also a bit of a play on the Ice Queen, which we just talked about. You guys just talked about. I was going to say I was in the chat, but you guys talked about on the podcast of Surprise with the idea of being the Ice Queen, right? Having a cold heart.
Yeah, and it's again very kind of fairy tales, but what if they were real, and what would the implications be? Still magical but real. Sorry, another tangent, but like if you're an audiobook person, I actually really recommend the audiobooks. They are the guy who reads them is honestly wonderful. There's one story where Geralt has to sing in his like the way he's talking, and he just does the singing. It's amazing. It's really amazing.
I mean, the audiobooks might be one way for me to go because I'd love to make time for these much sooner rather than later, but my list of books that I actually need to read is so long. But if I was reading something else, but then also listen to the audiobooks of The Witcher, that might be a way to do it. So
yeah.
I'll be looking into that.
Especially since it's a longer series, that might be good just to get you started. I also have heard that the audiobooks for the Expanse series are apparently very good as well.
Maybe that's how I should read those.
I'm still stuck in the first one because I'm trying to read it, and it's just, since I'm in school, I have so much reading all the time.
Oh gosh,
so.
yeah.
I'm going to take a major digression for a second since we're talking about audiobooks, and today happens to be the birthday of Professor J.R.R. Tolkien. I want to recommend, if you haven't listened to it yet, the new audiobook version of The Hobbit, which was read by Andy Serkis, and it's phenomenal. So anybody who has an interest in those stories, definitely check that out. And hopefully HarperCollins will be paying me my fee now. But yeah, so I think the stream was supposed to be about Yennefer, so we'll it's her. I guess we should probably definitely talk about episode 5, where her and Geralt finally meet, and like I was really excited when this.
That's the Jen episode, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just because you've been waiting for that. These two characters who their stories have to intersect at some point, but the way the story plays out with the time jumps and everything, you're not really even sure that those two storylines in the episode are happening at the same time. And so when it becomes apparent that they are converging, it's really exciting. And I just love that their meeting starts with Geralt walking into an orgy, and he's like, I brought you apple juice.
Which is definitely not how it's not how it happened in the books, right? He just walks in and she's just like naked.
Yeah, the apple juice is there.
Yeah, the apple juice is definitely there.
She's just spent the night with her current beau, who is the owner of the house that she's taking refuge in. She's definitely not organizing an orgy of the entire town, apparently. Which again, it's kind of like
license.
I don't know how to feel about that, because like on the one hand, maybe everybody signed up for it, but they all look hella confused when they when the spell breaks, and I'm just a little bit like, they consented to this, right? Like, yeah, because she definitely, I mean, like she likes having power over people, and she likes making them do what she wants, and like, I really hope they all signed up for this. But even if they did, I imagine that there would be some pleasure on her part of just manipulating people with her magic.
I took it as there was no consent. And I think it also is a bit of a commentary on how she sees sex as power, right? Mm-hmm. Like you just mentioned that in the books, she's basically staying in the house because she's getting with the guy. So there's also
she's getting with the guy so she can stay in the house.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like, so she kind of sees it as transactional and as a power move. And so I think that that scene does make sense in that way, but it's also like, oh dude, oh no. It is kind of funny though, because Jaskier is like paralyzed, and so whenever Geralt sets him down, everyone's like grabbing at him. He's like, oh. It is a funny scene, and it definitely really introduces you to her disillusionment and her need for control, right? Even though she is enjoying this as far as control, it's not like really that fun for her. You can tell that it's just whatever, but dang, does she look good in that mask? She's so sexy.
Oh yeah, she does.
Well, sorry, that's my only commentary.
Sorry, this is the
now it's a thirst stream.
It's the thirst portion of the stream. Yeah.
Well, that's when she and Tisaya have that fight, right? About like Tisaya's like, stop doing this, and she's like, no. And yeah, I think it's really interesting that one of her first instincts is to like tell Geralt that she wants to see him naked, basically. Like in the book, it's a little bit like, well, you stink, go take a bath. But it's so interesting that like they're naked in the baths together, and it's kind of the least sexual moment so far, because they're just kind of like very
scrub-a-dub-dubbing.
Yeah, and just kind of like we're just like feeling each other out, really, and we're not necessarily, not in a sexual way, just in like a power. Like assessing each other's power kind of way. Yeah,
I don't know. I found the interplay between the two of them. I actually found quite sexy. So I don't. It's that kind of. I like the sort of back and forth where, like, you know, she uses magic to like turn the mirror away, and he's like, "That's cheating," and all that stuff. And the music is really good during this scene as well, because it's sort of playful, but, you know, hinting at their romance and all that. I think it's, you know, and, you know, my interests don't lie in that direction, but Henry Cavill is sitting there, you know, with his arms sort of back, you know, flexing, like, I get it.
Good looking man.
Yeah.
Okay, but the sexiest scene, yeah, Anna, I'm with you. Whenever she like has her shirt off and she paints on her belly, is just like, I'm in this for the plot as I eat my popcorn. The plot.
Let's make it clear. Phenomenal actress, great performance.
Very talented.
We very much respect her, but yeah.
Her eyes.
Yeah. And I'm glad that they actually did well with the purple eyes.
Yeah, they look great.
It was CGI'd later, right? In editing, they put it in. Is that correct, Nicole? Do you know?
I don't know, but it looked pretty CGI. I think she even had them like they glow at certain points.
Yeah, I think that I don't think she had to wear contacts, which was the problem they were having when they first did Game of Thrones. They decided just to dispense with it altogether because they didn't like the contacts. But I'm pretty sure they did for The Witcher. They did CGI, and that seemed to fix the problem with, you know, contacts irritating the actor's eyes.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see if they take that on with House of the Dragon, if, you know, if that's something that's been established that they can actually do, or if they'll just stick with what was established on Game of Thrones. We shall see.
Yeah. Very interested to see that.
But I think the Djinn, though, is really fascinating because it shows how it's just another example, like with the Hunt for the Dragon. It's another example of kind of what she's willing to do and to try and to push the limits of magic and being safe in order to try and get what she wants. And it's also hilarious because Jaskier wakes up and then there's just like this half-naked woman there, and he's like, "Did we?" I mean,
oh, Valley of Penis is another thing.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, it's barred on probably the best line. And the way he says, like, toss a coin to your witch, oh, Valley of Penis.
That's great.
Somebody's gonna use that audio against me.
I think the mix of power and sex in this episode is a really great kind of commentary on Yennefer's character in general. And it's also kind of interesting that, you know, Geralt originally is like, I can't sleep, so I'm gonna, you know, try and go wrestle this Djinn, which is like, we've all been sleep deprived and thought of doing really stupid stuff. It's like not a good idea.
It's like, and everybody's right. That is an extreme thing to do for sleeplessness, and shows that there is something more going on.
There's definitely something more. Yeah. Geralt can't really deal. Yennefer also can't really deal. That's why they are kind of attracted to each other with that similar kind of suppressing of their real feelings.
And I have to say again, this was mentioned earlier, the whole thing with Jaskier throughout the episode, like, you know, when he walks in and they first, you know, see Yennefer, but it's sort of throughout that whole opening where Geralt's just dragging the park along and he's in so much pain. And I like to think that when he enters the room, it's like, God damn it, why do I have this going on? In any other circumstance, I'd be loving this.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think Amy had to step aside for a second, but we're about halfway through. So
I had to blow my nose. I'm back.
Okay, but this is a good time for the mid-roll anyway. I'll start off so I don't forget, because last time.
Also, mid-roll for people that are just now joining us. There's another hour. This is just in the middle.
Yeah,
so please stick around.
Nobody leave.
No one leave.
No, last time that I was, it was my responsibility to read out our patrons. I forgot, and luckily Stephen came in to remind me, I think. But let's go ahead and do that now. Let's see if I can get all these. I'll start with our landed knights, Sir Beth of Tarth, Sir Peadar the Irreverant, our lords and ladies, Lady Leaf Underhill, and who is this person? Aemy Blackfyre, lover of poles. And then we have our High Council, Sixto Sounds, Sir Maura Lee of Starfall, Lord John Bronsteen the Wise, and ridiculous Ed Tollett. So thank you guys. We value your support so much, and thank you very much. And as for what is coming up next week, I almost started talking about what was coming up next week on John Webster Film. I guess I should probably say stick to Here Dragons for the moment. We're going to be continuing on with our discussion of The Expanse next week, so make sure you tune in for that. Like I've just been so excited to go along on the journey of this season with the episodes dropping week by week. I know, Amy, you're not a fan of that format, but it's better for us. It's better for us content creators. So yeah. And plus, I like thinking about the episodes for a week before I see the next one. So, yeah.
I like to stay up until 5 a.m. binging all of them, but to each their own.
Yeah, I will go ahead and mention over on John Webster Film last night, Amy and I were joined by Carol Brown to do a discussion on Wonder Woman 1984, which was a fantastic discussion. I think it went a lot of places maybe we didn't expect, and I definitely recommend checking it out. And it was our first time doing a new release and a movie that we didn't like automatically love everything about. I think that's a difference. If any of you want to actually see me have a more critical eye towards something, make sure you watch that stream. And next week we're going to be talking about the film A Dangerous Method. It'll be Amy and me continuing on with our love of Keira Knightley movies, so make sure you check that out. Amy, what do you have going on?
Also, I was just going to tell, if you also love Keira, you can follow the Knights of Keira anywhere. We love our queen. We talk about her. We rejoice in her wonderfulness. So please check that out. So I was about to say next month. It is January 2021. Hello. This month, I am going to have Micah Clark on for my second episode of Buddy Banter. And we have decided on a topic, y'all. We are going to talk about DC TV shows and movies. You might notice I'm a bit of a fan. We're going to talk about our discussion of Wonder Woman kind of got Micah's juices going, and he decided to pick that topic. So Buddy Banter is once a month series I do where I invite a friend on my channel and we talk about whatever they want to talk about. And this guy over here was my first ever guest. So please check out the first episode of Buddy Banter. We had a really great, quite personal discussion about gender stereotypes and how it affects the way the media we consume and the characters we like. What I have coming up is an essay about Hua Mulan and comparing her to Alara/Sorella and Brave Danny Flint from A Song of Ice and Fire. And I'm also going to do a yin and yang, black and white symbolism in A Song of Ice and Fire. And I have a Witcher essay coming up, and that's also going to be about yin and yang symbolism in The Witcher, specifically looking at Geralt and Yennefer. So if you're interested in that, that's what I'm going to have. And maybe someone in this stream might agree to come on. That would be very nice to talk about it, since we're already diving into it. But yeah, I have that, and I'm going to continue my His Dark Materials analysis, as well as diving into Avatar: The Last Airbender. And have you heard The Gospel of the Poppy War by R.F. Kuang? Every time, John, every time. Please read this, because I need you to consume my content. There are a couple of people in the chat that are in my book club where I read a chapter to them every week, and we talk about it, and they are all enjoying it immensely, and we're having a great time. Yes, we're definitely going to talk about the animated series as well. All things DC on the screen is what we're going to talk about. So that should be a really fun episode. I'm sorry my plugs took forever. Also, Bleep the Patriarchy on the Unspun Yarn, February 10th. It has been rescheduled. We're going to have Load the Links on to talk about the binary and why it's bullcrap. So we're going to have a really good time.
Michal, tell everybody where they can find you and promote the hell out of yourself.
Wow, I am not even close to that busy. You can find me on Twitter. That's kind of where I hang out. I'm at Ink as Rain INKASRAIN. I tweet about things. I podcast with the Vassals of Kingsgrave a lot. We actually do have a Witcher series that we have kind of ongoing, like primarily a first read. But I haven't been participating in that for a while because I'm a little up to here with Witcher content. We have a Harry Potter reread. We have a Lord of the Rings reread, our second one that's going on. Lots of really fun stuff on there. I just finished covering The Mandalorian with my podcast Levels of an Access, and we'll be back for the WandaVision show in a weekish. Unfortunately, I don't have too much writing on my plate right now because of furloughs and economics and stuff like that. So the stuff I'm writing right now is not really interesting for anyone to read. But I am writing a novel if anyone's interested in knowing about that. So yeah, that's pretty much me.
You're like, I don't have that much going on, and then you drop, I'm writing a novel. I'm like, yeah, that's that's definitely a big deal. Go you. So it's funny because we are also going to be talking about WandaVision coming up on a stream soon, because although I am, sort of self-confessed not the biggest MCU fan in the world, Stephen, very much is super into that, and Nessie as well. And to that show's credit, it does look really wild and very interesting. So
it does, yeah. My sister-in-law, actually, who has seen maybe like 2 movies in the MCU, for some reason is like, I'm really excited for that show.
Are we talking about WandaVision?
Yeah. And I'm like, why?
Oh my God, I'm such an X-Men fan. John knows this, so I'm very excited.
How's it?
Yeah, we're Amy and I trying to figure out how our discussion coming up on John Webster film of the first X-Men film won't just turn into a whole wide discussion of everything X-Men.
Yes, and we're going to have Kelly, aka Jaded Redhead, on, and my best friend in the whole world since I was 10, Jenna, is going to make her live streaming debut. I have pulled her into my world. And so all those in the chat, you've seen Jenna around. It's very exciting.
Yeah. It's going to be a blast. I can't wait. I think we've been building up to this for some time.
I mean, every now and then she's like, oh, that was a great, she'll text me afterward, that's a great stream. And I was like, yeah, it's almost as if anyone could do this who likes nerd things. And then just a couple weeks later, I was like, you want to come on for X-Men? So I laid the foundation.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive back into talking about Yennefer and I'm trying to. Do you guys want to talk any more about in episode 5? I'm trying to think about stuff we didn't talk about with that.
It really always strikes me as so. I don't know, like it's so sad that like this is, she keeps kind of like, she's like a video game character, like bumping into the wall that like she can't walk in that direction as far as like her own personal fertility goes, but like she keeps doing it, and like to the point where she's literally willing to sacrifice her life for like this fairly unlikely attempt at like investing her womb with the genie or whatever her specific plan was. But it's, it really, I think it's telling that like she hits that point right when she meets Geralt, because one of my theories about these characters in general, and I mean, it's not my personal theory, but it's one that I ascribe to, is that like a lot of their problems really come from that absence in their lives. And they're both trying to fill that hole in different ways. And ultimately to go back to the idea of fate, like it's not meant to be filled in the way they think it is. Geralt kind of substitutes a lot of the time, like either, casual sex or just kind of like a profession of nihilism. And that doesn't work. And Yennefer obviously first wants power, and then she wants a child, and all these things, and that doesn't work either. And when, you know, when they do discover what is going to work, the something more of their experiences together, everything just clicks and it makes so much more sense. And like, there's still complicated characters who mess up and all that stuff, but I appreciate every misguided step on the road, because it really makes so much sense, and it really contributes to the satisfaction of seeing them get to that more fulfilled place.
Yeah, and they also have both had the choice of reproducing taken away from them, right? Because Geralt is also, he's become sterile by being changed into a mutant, as they say in the series, by becoming a Witcher. And so his choice was also taken away from him. So there's a lot of parallels between these two characters, which is why I'm excited to write about them as yin and yang, because they kind of complete each other in a dysfunctional way.
And obviously she's, you know, the black and he's the white wolf, and
exactly.
And,
It's basically, I was reading the second book, and I had been chatting with some people in the podcast of Surprise, and somehow yin and yang came up, and I was like, huh. And then I was reading a passage in one of the short stories, and it literally described her as like with her black hair and dark features, and then him with his white hair. I was like, and I stickied that, and I was like, inspiration. But yeah, they really are. They're both kind of these two halves of a whole. And you know, when they come together, it's kind of a storm of a lot of things going on.
Yeah. On the subject of the books, now I'm rather interested, because especially as we go from this episode into the next one, where we've been told that they've, you know, been together many times over the course of the years. I'm wondering, with the books, do we get more of that, like, in between, or is it in a similar style where it's kind of, you know, there's a gap of years and meetings?
The short stories are kind of confusing. I'm sure there is a grand list somewhere, or a timeline of exactly how they work. But yeah, there are definitely a lot of gaps. There's times where they'll be like, oh, we were together 4 years ago, and like, that didn't end well. And you know, the actual novels are more sequential, but my personal thought is that that's where Lauren Hissrich got the idea for doing things out of order, because the novels don't necessarily jump around in time with characters, but they jump around in time from a much bigger perspective. And it kind of will drop you a couple centuries in the future every so often, look to the past for a while, like, and then, you know, just have parallel things that you know, you don't understand. But yeah, so I mean, there is a lot of Geralt and Yennefer kind of missed connections stuff sometimes, and then some like, oh, they definitely matched that connection, and things happen. Not all of them good.
Yeah. You know, and I mentioned it earlier, but I really do love that that scene between the two of them in episode 6, where, you know, for a moment before, you know, before things go downhill, and they have to be separated because the story demands it. There's this moment where they both actually get to be happy, and there's a recognition of what they actually mean to each other, and, you know, and for the first time they both wake up, and, you know, the other person is both there, and, you know, and I really like that. And of course, you know, that means that we're headed for, you know, for sadness.
It never lasts.
Yeah, but yeah, it's really tender, and especially for, you know, these characters who thus far in the show have just known sort of suffering. It's a beautiful moment, and you wish that it could go on, but like, I'm very much looking forward to, you know, moving ahead in the story, even though I'm sure it's going to be, you know, dark, and there's going to be trials and all that stuff. But I like the fact that they're headed towards this family dynamic with Ciri, because I think that's really beautiful.
Yeah, the family dynamics are a huge part of The Witcher, and a huge part of why I love it, across a couple of different vectors. And yeah, just about that scene, like, that really stuck out to me too. I mean, first of all, it's the first time. Oh,
look who's here!
Of course. Can't stay away for one day, can you, Stephen?
Hey,
I
Steve,
told you I was going to be in as soon as I was like able.
how you doing, man?
Hi, everybody. It's great to be back. Hi, Michal.
hey.
It's nice to actually have you on. I wish we'd done it sooner. Now that I'm like, why didn't we have you sooner?
Well, the funny thing is, like, every time someone's mentioned your name, like, I know what you look like, but in my head, you're just Steven dressed as Lyanna from whatever the last day of Con of Thrones last year.
I will
last
take
year, 2
it.
years ago. Yeah. So it's literally everyone's goes Steven, and I'm like, oh, the blue flower crown.
Hey, look, if my association is with Lyanna Stark, I'm doing something right.
He is my canon Lyanna when I
Nice.
picture her in my head.
So,
beautiful and dainty.
big surprise, I did not have a chance to rewatch The Witcher over the weekend. I had my daughter over the Christmas holidays, and then I was just at my brother's wedding yesterday, so I have had zero time to play catch up. So I just kind of wanted to be here and say I think Yennefer is awesome. You guys have been crushing it up to this point. I'm sure I'll have some other things to say. Oh yeah, you know what? I'll tell you what. I'll be right back. But hi, Michal. I wish we'd had you sooner. And we're going to have you back for something where I get to talk to you the whole time too.
Okay. My pleasure.
And I missed a good bit of the mid-roll. Did we say Expanse next week?
Yep.
Right on.
And I actually did remember to thank all our patrons as well.
Yeah, I heard that part. So I'm going to be right back. But
Okay.
please continue.
Cool.
Yay,
Yeah.
he gets to be me.
No, I'm changing that immediately.
Oh, it's because I'm too pretty. He automatically said it is. Yes.
Like, I was 50-50 on joining or not, but I'm like, this crew is just too good looking. I need to bring down the average a little bit.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, and actually that makes me think
At least you have facial hair since John, since Erin's in the chat, and anytime that you shave, she has a heart attack. So
I know I can never shave.
Yay!
There we go. Yes. So, okay, what were we talking about with the Yennefer?
We were still on the Jen episode. I don't know if we were going to move on, but maybe Stephen, do you have anything to say like about her origins up to this point, or her part? I know you didn't get a chance to rewatch, but is there something that jumped out at you?
I guess it just really impressed upon me, like, one of the saddest things I've ever seen on a TV show was her father bargaining the price of her. Like, I can't remember how many pigs she was worth, but she got bargained down to like 4 pigs or something. And I'm just, that is such a heartbreaking thing. And obviously Anya is a very sort of traditionally attractive woman who they went really out of their way to try to make her less attractive, if you'll forgive the parlance there. But she is, even at that point, she was the most interesting character in the show from that point on. Stepfather, maybe. Again, I didn't get to rewatch, so my...
he said something to the mom of "she's not my daughter," something like that,
well,
right?
Because her
father
was half elf.
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. So she's not fully human, and so it's also a bit of a racist, if you will, commentary on the adoptive stepfather, whatever's part. But it's, I mean, unnecessary pedantry. You know how it is.
Do we do that here?
No,
I don't believe so. I've never heard that.
In a nerd stream? What?
Michal, you may not realize this, but that's our unofficial motto.
It's unnecessary pedantry.
Yeah. That's awesome.
We're going to get shirts made, Michal.
Oh my God, that's amazing. I love it.
Yeah.
We started with, actually. Her dad is half elf.
Right. Yeah, but I think Yennefer she is fascinating because she is a study. If she had been a male character, her appearance would have mattered far less. She would have been valued far higher than the pig or half a pig or whatever she ended up being worth. So she is a woman in what might be considered a traditionally male role, and it's just very telling that what she is forced to give up in order to achieve the power that she so richly craves is perhaps the thing that is the most defining feature of women in general. Her ability to bear children is a very defining thing about what it means to be a woman. Whether you choose to have children or not, the fact that you are able is one of those things that well, I could never do that. I can't carry a child to term. I just can't do it.
Hi, Nessie.
Have you tried, Stephen?
I did. I did try.
Yeah, clearly you've never seen Junior, Stephen. It's possible. So.
There is a movie about it, so it must be true. But and again, I only know The Witcher from the TV series. I have not played the games. I have not read the books. I don't know how to read, so unfortunately, I guess maybe if I got them on Audible, I could.
So many Song of Ice and Fire fans don't know how to read.
Right. Although I was talking with someone recently who has read the books and who has played the games, and they were saying that the Yennefer in the show is the most sort of relatable, or the most relatable version of that character that they know. Like they find her more likable on the show, and I found her to be very likable. Whether or not she always did the right thing, she didn't. But who does do the right thing all the time? She is fascinating because it is a study in woman, man, non-binary individual. Her arc is a study in the sacrifices you make to achieve power, no matter what field you're in. A lot of times you do have to leave behind your romantic entanglements, your desire to have a child. I've heard a lot of women who are in the upper echelons of whatever industry they're in, they find it difficult to make time for their children. And that's true for a man or a woman, I think. That you're going to have to sacrifice to achieve power, preeminence in whatever field you're in. But I also like that they gave Yennefer the story that they did, that she is having the regrets about the things that she's had to give up in order to achieve that preeminence.
I do think, though, culturally, women are defined by childbirth. So women who want to have children but aren't able to really struggle with what their place in the family and in society is. And then women like myself who have never wanted children and will never want children also struggle with what being a woman means. If you don't do the to me, marriage means marriage, and it's separate from having kids. But a lot of people, it's get married and start a family. And that's very much like a set kind of way to do things. And so when women are married and want to have kids and then cannot, it's a roadblock. And then when women are married and don't want kids and everyone keeps telling them you'll change your mind, that's also a roadblock. So I think Yennefer is an interesting example of a woman who, just was so focused on getting what she wanted. She didn't even, it's obvious in the show, definitely, that she didn't really think it through. She's like, just get this stuff out of me and do your magic, right? He even said, we don't have the herbs ready. So she did that, like, no painkillers. So she really, it was a very, like, I'm doing this now and it's happening kind of decision.
And I just want to note, like, just the way it's framed is an extremely birth-like thing. It's and isn't that the episode where Geralt fights
on the stirrups and
and she like comes out of it all like like
That's-
basically like she's come out of a womb.
It's like a
and it's intercutting
birth, new
with
birth kind of thing.
Geralt fighting the Striga, and that is
Yeah.
one of the most brilliantly constructed scenes in the series for me. Just the way it cuts back and forth between that. It's one of my favorite episodes of the season for sure, and I just, I can't help it, editor here, so like I'm fascinated by the way they piece that together. I think it was
You
amazing.
had Ada who did have the child, but then it was considered unnatural. I say that with quotes. Incest is not good, guys. But it's just the way that this show plays with motherhood, parenthood, lack thereof. Is really fascinating, and I think that Yennefer really highlights these issues that women, men, non-binary, and trans individuals all struggle with when it comes to the decision and having your decision taken away, like for Geralt and Yennefer. But yeah, that's a really great way to put it, Michal, though. She does have kind of a rebirth. She literally, like, she's all slimy.
Yeah.
And she's, like, crawling like babies crawl. And it's very much, very symbolic. My analysis in literary analysis is mostly focused on symbolism. And that's definitely a symbolism of rebirth going on. She has become a new person, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the shadow of her old self.
And I really like Nessie's comment there about she sacrifices her personal relationships to get what she wants. And actually, her story comes sort of back around at the end when she sort of embraces her relationship with Tissaia and the fact that that's why she goes with her. And it's not for any great cause or, saving a kingdom or the lands or anything. Tissaia says, you do it for me. And then that's why she goes, and so I like that sort of step forward is a result of reestablishing that personal relationship.
Aaron, I think this is true of Yennefer, but for Geralt, he was taken as a child and made into a Witcher, so he did have his choice taken away to have a child. But you are right, and that Yennefer did choose this and then regretted it later.
Well, and I think it also, but it's a question: do you understand?
What you're giving
for
up.
what you're signing up for. Also, it's in that way. It's sort of almost as parallels, not exactly, but sort of similar to, over on Game of Thrones when like Jon is all gung ho about joining the Night's Watch, and and people are like, you don't really know what you're getting into. His uncle's like, you don't know what you'd be giving up, and it's that sort of the same thing at play where she's completely confident that. She knows what she's going after. She wants that. That's all she wants. But when she realizes that it wasn't worth the price that she paid, then yes, she does have that regret. And I think that's, and that's completely reasonable, obviously.
Yeah. I think also there's an element of Geralt and Yennefer both being like their human. Partly this is tied into their abilities or lack thereof to have children, but their very humanity is extremely questionable for a lot of the antagonists that they come across, and that's something that they both grapple with. Like they are kind of ageless. They are sterile. They kind of just function in this world as beings above the standard cares of everyday people, and that leaves them feeling extremely cut off. And I think like that's important because kind of what you can survive after cutting off is sort of their question, right? Like Yennefer thinks she can cut off this ability to have children without major consequence. Then she decides it's her relationships that she can cut off without consequence. She ends up realizing it's neither of those. And Geralt also, like he functions, his whole like, I'm alone, I'm lonely, leave me alone, I want to be alone. Like
I'm sorry, I just love Geralt. He's such, he's the master of minimalism.
Yeah, exactly.
The way he's always like, fuck.
Yeah, and he's he is cut off in a very real way, and that's part of why Jaskier is such an appealing character, because he like crashes headlong into that intention. But that idea of not being connected to other things is a huge theme with both of them, and something that really evolves through. I mean, I assume it will evolve in the show. It definitely evolves in the books.
Yeah. Yeah, and then we get, I think we talked about most of the episodes. When we get down to the final 2 episodes, she reaches out to, what's his name? Is it Istrid? I think, and, can't really blame him for being like, no, that's all right.
I recognize this toxic relationship for what it is.
Yeah. Because, she's basically not even hiding the fact that, I've tried everything else, and now I'd like to give you another shot. And so, I don't really blame him for being like, yeah, thanks, but no thanks. But, like, that just it's funny because it's what we've been talking about. Like, that's not a very, decent thing that she does as far as reaching out to him. But I recognize that it's not a great thing that she's trying to do, but I kind of love her all the more for watching her try. I think it's a sign of how, great the character is that we kind of feel for her, even as she's kind of doing this crappy thing. And we want Istrid to say yes for her sake somehow, but we recognize that for himself, he really shouldn't. So. But that does then lead to her finding her way back to what's the school or the
Aretusa.
Aretusa. A lot of names. I can't remember everything.
You're just at the start.
Yeah.
Wait till we get to the number of witches that that you start talking about later. It's a lot. It's a lot of names.
There's another line that I really like where she's she's talked into going back by the guy who approaches her and says he implies that Tisea asked for her, and then they get there and he's like, no, actually I never said that. I just said that she said you were the best student she ever had. And the line I'm talking about is where she says, like, it didn't take 5 minutes for the lies to start. And it's like you just feel like she's not at all surprised, and it's just this frustration of this whole system that she considers just to be complete BS, and she's just done with it. But I like the fact that she finally is willing to help a bit, because Tisea finally does say, please do it for me, which is a change. But what do you guys think of sort of her character arc going into these these final episodes?
I'm gonna let the ladies go first.
Yep.
I found interesting kind of the sort of reunion that she has with the woman who taught her, right? I'm totally blanking on the headmistress's name. But she is telling her, preserve your chaos. So there's kind of
actually it's Tisea.
Actually it's Tisea. Thanks, Michal. So Tisea, yeah. So it's really interesting that you have this idea that she's kind of the last kind of defense, and you have all of these other magic wielders going first, and seeing how Yennefer's reacting to that, and wanting to, being really frustrated and wanting to do more, but knowing that her role is to preserve her chaos in order for then those that make it past the magic wielders, then she can attack them. I think that this was probably the best acted episode for Anya, just because of the way that she was in contact with them telepathically, and just her heart was crushed every time that she saw them fall. And so I think, like with the part about the baby, we see her kind of break down a little bit, and we see the visage of the strong, you know, sorceress kind of start to fall. And so I think that is going to be important going forward for when, you know, she's going to be with Geralt and Ciri. She's going to kind of have to be a little bit more open. She can't keep these walls up anymore. And so I found that really fascinating, that battle was kind of an example of her bringing down her own personal walls that she put around herself.
Yeah, and just mentioning about, you know, talking about Ciri, it's like, I just can't wait to see that dynamic at play, because, you know, this whole season she's been like, this is what I want to have a child, and she's going to have someone, you know, she's going to be stepping into that, you know, that role of being a mother, and I'm just really interested to see how those two, not just how those two actors play off each other, but how the characters relate, and how Yennefer actually does respond to being in that position.
Yeah, I mean, this is the first time, if we're going right to the finale, like that she makes a choice that is a sacrifice that she's not benefiting from, right? And to see her reach that point, and I really love that Tissaia is so involved in this, because you find the guilt that, like, you know, Tissaia's kind of weird mix of like motherliness and guilt and, you know, kind of anger for treating her the way she does, but then also that's sort of natural in a way. I love that it is Tissaia who kind of pushes her to really embrace this power that she has, and yeah, I think the idea that, like, the show leaves off without telling us how that ends, the season anyway, it's a really interesting choice, because I was very frustrated. I was like, where's Yennefer? Like, come on, tell me. And it's a change, you know, and there is some change here that we aren't being privileged to see yet. And we kind of just have to guess at how that kind of not it's not out of character, but it's a very different choice for the character to make, like the impact that's going to have.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to basically echo what Michal just said. It's really, I really enjoyed seeing Yennefer do things for Yennefer throughout the whole season, but by the end come to the realization that she really is the only one that can sort of save the world in that moment. She's the only one that's in a position to do what needs to be done to save everyone that's still there, and she does make that decision. She's everything she's done up to that point is so that she can, and it's very relatable, to sort of stick it to her stepfather or her mother, or to all the people who said that she was less than because of the circumstance of her birth or what have you.
Yeah, and again, like, this is the highlight of this, is that this is not something that they have to do, right? Like the general, the bigger wizard society, the Brotherhood, is like, we're not getting involved in this. We're like kind of Team Nilfgaard, to be honest, and they're like we're going to stand against this, and that is it really raises the stakes, but, you know, obviously the stakes are very high anyway, but it just changes the nature of what they're doing, because it's also just not like a big, like, sorceress thing to do something selfless. You know, that's not really their the way they do things. So it kind of, like, Yennefer kind of her journey, her personal journey, kind of marries really well with kind of the general the change that's happening in some of the sorcerers anyway. Also, I did want to say, like, I thought they did a really good job of kind of giving us a sense of who a lot of these other sorceresses were. Like, Triss, like, stands out really clearly. I don't think we see her. Oh, we do see her in the Striga episode, but there's like one or two other witches who, like, I don't know why I'm calling them witches. I'm also doing a Harry Potter reread. I think that's it. They're, the sorceresses really stand out as kind of like the one who gets the thingy put in her ear and like ends up unfortunately sabotaging them. I thought it was very, like, I cared for all of them, and it was interesting to see.
Yeah, I really did love seeing the fact that, it's established in these episodes that that Yennefer and Triss know each other, but we don't see that in a previous episode. What we do see is Triss involved with Geralt with everything with the Strida, and so I really actually liked seeing her brought forward in this part of the story, and then you're finding out that they know each other, and I like that relationship is built. We see that illustrated throughout these episodes. I really enjoyed that. It's this whole thing about bringing together these different storylines and characters, which is really exciting in these final episodes. And I also love the fact that Geralt is out of commission for the last episode. That's so great. And the fact that, Yennefer is really at the forefront and, and exerting the power, in this episode. And Geralt is just basically, he's, gets knocked out of commission in the first couple minutes, and, he just goes along for a ride, and then he's
having like destiny fever dreams and stuff.
Yeah. Well, he's fighting his demons, and Yennefer is fighting the Battle of Sodden Hill. So
yeah, and sorry, I had a train of thought and I lost it just then. But
probably going to be a lie. That's what that means, right? When you forget what you're going to say, it means you're probably going to lie, right?
Yeah, probably.
Is that a thing?
Sounds like an old wives' tale to me.
But yeah, just I'm desperate really to know what is going to happen with Yennefer at this point, because we've got Geralt and Ciri have been united, and then the great final line, who's Yennefer? And so I'm interested to see like how that, how they're brought together with her. I'm gonna put up. We do actually have a season 2 image that came out, I think a couple months ago or something. So it doesn't look like she's having a great time.
No,
not great, Bob.
Yeah, but yeah, hopefully, I hope they're not going to drag it out on and on and on until those characters get together. But who knows? Television's main goal is not to satisfy me all the time. So we'll see.
I heard you guys talking earlier about Yennefer and the Queen and the baby. Do we feel like that's the moment where maybe she started to have her buyer's remorse about giving up her reproductive capability? In that moment, she sees this baby and she decides, maybe this is something I do want.
Well, I think it's also that she talks about kind of nothing changing for her, right? Like she's been in this powerful position for 3 decades, and what is she doing? She's just kind of watching the royal family
and serving.
Exactly. And she's kind of like, and now my shitty job is watching you like on this shitty trip. So I think that desire to have an impact is definitely tied to her feelings about her fertility.
Yeah, do you
and
think
for change, right? Like longevity is boring. if fiction teaches us anything, it's that. So.
Well, do you think that's the moment where she identifies that as something that she wants, and before that, she obviously knows she's not content in the least bit, and that she regrets, taking the path that she did. But is that the moment where she looks at childbirth as something that might, quote unquote, fix everything?
For me, I don't know about you, Michal. I saw that as the moment where she realized something was missing, and then she happens to kind of inject that with the child is missing. But I think that's when she realized, we see her in the coach being bored and everything, and I think after that crazy portal back and forth, she realized how dissatisfied she is with her life, and then she kind of projected that onto being a mother. But I don't know, I think that I'm empty came before I should be a mother is kind of how I read it.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I think that's also like, it's a little bit like, what do you get for the woman who has everything? Like technically Yennefer has everything. She's extremely wealthy, she's extremely powerful, she's extremely gorgeous, she has all the things that she thought she wanted, and I think it's really natural for her to go back to the thing that she gave up, not thinking that she would want it. And I do think that this story kind of crystallizes that, especially seeing like, the disposability of this child and of her mother. I think that would definitely highlight that. And it would have been a great story, right? I don't think anybody was like, oh, this child's totally going to die. Like it seems like it's the way it's supposed to go. Like she rescues her from this, murder attempt that she's supposed to die because she's just a girl, and her mother even tries to sacrifice her and then gets raised by a fairy godmother, and none of that comes true. And I think that Yennefer's not good at not getting what she wants, and I think that leads into her behavior in some of the later episodes. Again, it's like it's do you want this or do you just not have it? And
Yeah,
and Gerald poses exactly that question to her. So, and it's almost kind of, you almost feel like it's kind of a cold thing for him to say, because it's sort of his gut reaction. He's like, really? A child? And it's like, that's just going to make her want it more, because it's like, screw you.
You think that she shouldn't have it.
Yeah.
This is actually a good question from Tony, and something that I've been wondering. I don't know if any of you know that. If the law of surprise is a I can never say the author's name, but the author of this series,
Andrei Sapkowski.
Yes,
actually, it's Andrei Sapkowski.
Actually, you fit right in, Michal.
Oh my God, we are so stealing that for our Zoom chats.
I don't know. I think he might have made it up. It is possible that it's something. I can't remember what the specific fairy tale tie-in. I think it's something with the hedgehog is the fairy tale tie-in from that story. So I think he might have made it up. It's so evocative, isn't it? It's like one of those things you just hear and you assume it's like almost Tolkien-esque or Arthurian. But
and it's funny that you say Tolkien-esque, because there's a documentary on Tolkien where Tom Shippey, who's a Tolkien scholar, talks about Tolkien invented many things that you just sort of, that even if they're not necessarily rooted in real life, it sounds like it is. You say the word hobbit, it's, and it is, and the word hobbit is rooted in other things, but it does sound like something that's always existed in these terms and the concepts that he comes up with. And similarly, I agree, the law of surprise almost kind of sounds like that. It's stated, and it just feels like it's rooted in history and all the stuff. It's beautifully done.
Well, not to turn this into a Tolkien stream, but I always see hobbits as coming directly from the Wee folk, which have been in legends and lore for a very long time. But the term certainly, and kind of what we think of when we think of hobbits with the big fairy feet and all that, is certainly a Tolkienism.
There are hobbits in the later books. Sapkowski does a lot of stealing, and a lot of adapting. Like there's a forest called Mirkvid that they go into at some point later. There's a lot of conscious. What's a nicer word for thievery? Borrowing inspiration.
There's a line in the Tolkien biopic where his professor says, "No, not stolen, borrowed." Yeah, it's languages are never stolen. That's the line. So,
right. So I kind of did a little bit of Googling, and it says that Sapkowski based the law of surprise on a biblical story. After Jephthah defeats the Ammonites in battle, he promises God that he will sacrifice the first thing he sees when he returns home. So that's the origin of the law of surprise, apparently.
Okay.
Oh, interesting.
Huh.
Well, that's also a Greek story. With one of, I think, Achilles, or one of the big name Greeks who has to sail to Troy, sacrifices his daughter to
Agamemnon.
There you go.
Agamemnon.
Yeah, and then that has great consequences later. For
and I think in some versions of the story, she's like, "Father, offer me up," and others, it's not quite so consensual. So yeah.
Yeah, and in other versions of the Yiftach in the Hebrew story, it's either she is literally sacrificed. Sometimes it's like an animal sacrificed in her place. Sometimes she's like pledged to, like, she has to live alone in a tower. Like, there's a lot of different interpretations on what that means. Yeah,
I know in some stories it's being willing to do it and then just about to do it, right? Like with the guy who was going to kill his son Isaac.
Yeah.
Okay.
Abraham and Isaac, yeah.
I haven't been in Sunday school in a while. But yeah, sometimes just the willingness to sacrifice is sacrifice enough in the eyes of deities. So.
Yeah, I mean, those stories are actually in kind of Jewish commentary tied together a lot because of that idea of, like, you're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to kill your child. So, like, what's the deal?
Are you sure? There's been a couple of times where I was pretty sure I was supposed to kill my kid.
Amy's like, another list in the... She, like, check on the list of I'm not having kids.
Yeah. Oh, God, now I have to sacrifice to deities. God, this is getting confusing. That reminds me of my favorite dad joke of Stephen's. Or I don't even know if it'd be considered a dad joke because it's really dark about babies.
Oh yeah, I love kids. I just can't eat a whole one.
You just what?
I can't eat a whole one.
Oh God.
It's supposed to be evocative.
Okay.
That's my favorite Stephen joke. I laugh every time he says it. Maybe one day it'll get old, but today is not that day.
So we're coming down to the last 10 minutes. So I'll just say,
I feel like the time just flew by.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like it was only 40 minutes for you, huh, Stephen?
So I guess we'll just go around and say, like, what's your favorite, the stuff with Yennefer in the season? We'll just go around. Amy, we'll start with you.
Yes, we will. I want to say that probably her episode with the Jinn and how she was willing to try and trap and use this really powerful creature. And if we use the Islamic version of the Jinn, there are some Muslims that won't even speak the name. It's considered very powerful and very dangerous. And some even believe if you think of it, that it can manifest and hurt you. So for her to, we use the term genie and we think of the blue guy from Aladdin, but it's actually really scary in mysticism mythology. So for her to be
that's like, Robin Williams, Amy.
I know it's what, did I say something that wasn't Robin Williams?
No, I'm just saying, just making
the blue
it clear.
Guy, yes. R.I.P. Robin Williams. Yeah, probably one of his best performances. Although I really liked him as Batty in Ferngully, where he got to rap. Okay, sorry, I'm going way off topic. My point is that for Yennefer to even attempt wrangling a Jinn is really shows her how desperate she was, and also shows how she really will throw caution to the wind to get what she wants. And I think that those who are kind of not super into Yennefer, I just really suggest that you give her a second look, because there is a lot going on there, and she is much more multifaceted than the first time you see it. I liked her the first time I watched, and the second time I watched, I saw a lot more nuance in her character. And the third time I watched, I thought that she was the most nuanced of all the characters. And I like my characters very gray. I don't like them black or white. So yeah, I really recommend that if you're not a huge Yennefer fan, that you give her a second, third, and fourth look, because I think that Sapkowski
Yes,
name
there you
is
go.
doing a lot with her character.
Yeah, I can't agree enough with that because as I said, even before I actually watched the show, it was clear to me that she was probably going to be the most fascinating part of this show, and actually watching it, completely showed that was right. The reason
Tony,
why
that's exactly the episode I listened to about the djinn that made me be like, oh crap, this is really dangerous. Yeah, Astonishing Legends has an two-part interview with a guy who it's not all about the djinn, but his main commentary is about the djinn, and it freaked me out. And let's just say I didn't sleep well that night. So yeah.
Oh, sorry. I just took.
No, you're fine. Go ahead, John.
Somebody put up. Yeah, but see, now I gotta listen to that episode, Amy.
Astonishing Legends is one of my favorite podcasts.
Yeah.
They do 3-hour episodes though, so for me that's a good thing. But for others, they're like, I don't have time for that. But 3-hour episodes, me and John, we do that all the time. So
Okay,
Yeah.
I will interject. I liked Astonishing Legends for a while, and then they got so credulous. Like they were just like, yeah, well, the guy said that this is exactly what the Mothman did, so that must be true, because why would he lie? And I'm like, many reasons. And you know.
they need to like get a third host who's a super skeptic. And
I get it. I don't mind like looking into stuff and having like an open mind and whatever. But sorry, I've never been able to share that particular pet peeve before, so that was just something that occurred to me.
Most people, I haven't talked to really anyone who's listened to it, so I'm glad that Tony was also deeply mortified by the djinn episode. Yeah. But yeah, check out Astonishing Legends if you don't like it. You didn't hear it from me then.
Also, a similar podcast that hasn't done a djinn episode, but Dark Histories is really good. I like that guy. Can I talk about Yennefer, my favorite thing?
You
Cool. I was like, I really don't know what to say, and then I was like, no, the part in episode 6 where she and Geralt wake up together is so like, it's, you get to see the best of both of them, and their body language is so relaxed, and they're just like, it's like they're different people. And you get this like glimpse into this alternate world where they like don't have these pressures and they don't have these limitations. And it's just like, it's really beautiful. It's also, I think, the first time that we get the lilac and gooseberries mentioned. So that's very critical to the whole thing. But yeah, I love it when you get to see characters stripped of their armor. And that was very much a scene like that.
Yeah. What about you, Stephen?
I'm always going to go for the payoff. So it's literally going to be like this moment right here that's on the screen right now, where she is kind of come full circle. She's had her hero realization moment, and she puts herself on the line knowing it'll likely kill her. I'm a sucker for that hero story. I always have been. You all who are regulars here know that. So for me, it's literally her channeling all that sorcery through her so that she can defeat, I'm going to say Niflheim, but that's wrong.
Nilfgaard.
Nilfgaard.
Niflheim
is like Norse mythology.
Isn't that the realm of the dark elves?
Yes, I think that's right. But yeah.
Everything is Marvel.
Like, seeing her, the way she struggles against the patriarchal expectations of her, y'all can all drink if you want. Seeing how she responds to that by becoming sort of very selfish, and then her realizations that, okay, while she's achieved the power, even that didn't lead her to where she wanted, because she's essentially just guarding the queen and her kid. And then she separates away from that and goes on to, you've got the djinn episode and all of that stuff, and all of that journey just finally leads her to that point where she does something of real substance and of real consequence. And I'm giving myself goosebumps just thinking about that journey for her. And for season 2, I'm really looking forward to seeing her. I mean, one great act of sacrifice like this does not mean that her character has flipped a switch and she's the paladin now. And I'm really looking forward to seeing the continuation of that journey for her. But just to see her reach the point where she can commit herself to that type of act was very satisfying for me.
Yeah, I definitely would not want to see her, all of a sudden, have completely different priorities and be a, different kind of character. I want to see that sort of struggle, struggle between both sides, especially when in the way that she relates to both Geralt and Ciri. This is the hard part about going last with these types of things, because people
we already picked all the good ones.
Already said, but I mean, I will say that like the scene where they're in bed together in episode 6 is definitely one that, because romantic at heart, so I really love that scene. But I'll also just throw a big mention out to her big power moment in episode 3 at the end of the episode, when she comes walking out and transformed, and and even though it's not a move that works out well for her, it's still like in the moment, like yeah, damn it, you go get it.
You go, girl.
Yeah.
Boy, am I thirsty.
I think we do also have to just note that Yennefer is just really pretty.
Yeah. I'm not at all like leaving this up for additional seconds.
That's never anything
reasons
that John and I do when we talk about beautiful women, is comment on their looks, Michal. Come on.
I mean, it's all about the plot.
Yeah.
All about the plot.
Boy, loving that plot.
Okay then. All right, so I think on that note we'll wrap up.
Okay, so you agree? You think you're really pretty? All right, sorry, I had to do it.
Jennifer's like, yes, I just had my uterus ripped out of my body for this. So yes, I do. Thanks.
Yeah.
So real quick, we'll just go through and talk to you about what's coming up next week. It'll be Nessie will be joining us, and her, Stephen, and I will be talking about what's that shirt, Stephen?
Sexy women. That's what you're gonna be talking about.
The Spans, which like I think I can speak for you, Stephen. Like, isn't this season just like absolutely incredible? I'm honestly been blown away by it.
Yeah, I'm saving it for next week. We're talking about episodes 4 through 6, but yes, it's going to be fantastic.
I'm excited.
Do you watch The Expanse, Michal?
I don't. I'm not a big sci-fi person, so I kind of. It's unfortunate because you have all these things that are like that come on, and then 2 years later, everybody's like, by the way, everybody in the Song of Ice and Fire fandom is obsessed with this. And I'm like, wait, when? When did that happen? I just read Duncan Egg, damn it. But it is on my long list.
I recommend it and the books as well, Michal, which everyone on this panel needs to start reading. So,
and Stephen,
listening to Stephen.
Do we have a guest lined up for that stream, or?
No, we don't yet. Not yet.
Okay. All right. Cool. Well, they just stay tuned to Twitter. If we do, we'll definitely announce it. Okay, Amy, talk about what you got coming up.
I did all my plugs at the mid-roll, so I won't do them again. But like I said, I have buddy banter with Micah. We're going to talk about DC on the TV. So any movies, television shows, animated or otherwise, we're going to talk all things DC. You might have noticed I'm a bit of a fan, so we're going to have a good time. And yeah, like I said, I'm continuing with my Song of Ice and Fire and His Dark Materials content, and I'm starting The Witcher, Avatar: The Last Airbender. And once again, have you heard the Gospel of the Poppy War? Please read it. Thank you very much. Yeah, please follow my blog and my Twitter. And if you don't like to read, guess what? I read all of my essays for you and have people on my channel to talk about them. You do not have to read a single word. So that's very exciting. I'm also Amy Poehler, Poller, and I like to poll people on Twitter about their thoughts. So please answer my polls.
Michal, if you just want to real quick run through again where people can find you and stuff that you're working on.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at InkEzrine. Definitely love talking to people on there. That's how this crew hunted me down. You can find me on the podcast of Surprise talking about The Witcher once a month with Aziz and Kyle, which is awesome. I do a podcast called Level 7 Access, which was formerly an Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. podcast and is now a kind of general Marvel / Star Wars / Disney Overlord podcast. I also do the Vassals of Kingsgrave, where I have a lot of Song of Ice and Fire content, as well as Harry Potter and anything else that's kind of going on. It's kind of a general nerd source. And I also do a podcast called Nice Jewish Fangirls.
I was just about to say, don't forget Nice Jewish Fangirls. I love that podcast.
It's about as self-explanatory as it gets.
So good.
Thank you. One of our hosts moved to Hong Kong, so we've been having some issues with scheduling, but
that'll happen when, they're like 14 hours different.
Yes.
Michal, I just want to echo what Stephen said earlier. We need to have you back on here to talk in the future. And I think I never want to speak for Aemy, but I'll go out on a limb and say that we're both probably pretty eager to have you on John Webster Film as well.
Oh my God, please.
I love that.
If you'd like to discuss a movie, just
pick
let
a
us.
movie, we'll talk about it. Whatever you want to talk about. Yes, please, Michal. Like I told Michal at the beginning, I have been fangirling over her for a little over a year now. So when John asked about people to talk about The Witchers, I was like, Michal. So I'm so glad.
Woo! My chair literally almost fell over. I'm sorry. I'm in my brother's room. My brother just got married, so like now his room is like free real estate, and his desk chair is complicated.
But yes, please come on John Webster Film.
Yes, I'd love to. Seriously.
So.
And Stephen, in case I missed anything that you want to mention, but I'm also at this point just going to thank you for trusting me with this stream and turn it over to you because I'm not closing this out when you're here.
Okay, well, thanks. I don't really know anything else off the top of my head. We're kind of touch and go right now as far as scheduling. Again, it's been a busy holiday season. I'm going to be cracking down on getting things lined up, getting guests lined up for stuff to come. Michal, I heard you talking about your love of the Marvel stuff. So when WandaVision comes out, I might twist your arm and get you to come talk about that.
Okay.
I know I'm supposed to be on Jolie's channel next week for...
Is it the 11th?
Yeah, the 11th to talk about the others and from the White Walkers for you TV-only people. But
oh, crap, I am too. Please come. Please come on her channel. All hail the Night's Queen.
Yeah, all hail the Night's Queen. And there was something else. Oh, yeah. I'm talking with a couple of people, specifically a recurring guest on the channel, Cecilia from Geeksterelia, where we might be doing a little examination of the latest season of Cobra Kai, which I have already binged in one day, and it was really, really good. But John and Nessie don't watch that show, so I'm going to have to go elsewhere to find people to talk about it. But that'll be coming soon, and as soon as we have something nailed down, I'll let you all know. But yeah, is that it, everybody? Anybody else got anything?
I'm good.
Thanks for reminding me about Thanks for reminding me about the All Hail the Night's Queen live stream.
Wow, downgraded.
Okay, hold on. Is that better?
Oh, how do you feel about that?
All right. I'm done. Oh, okay. There you go. You know what? All right, everybody. You know what
Women
it is.
on top, you know how it is.
Yeah. I'm here for it. But y'all know what it is. Until next time, peace and be excellent to each other.